Hey there, folks. Welcome. We are going to get started in just a moment. So take a moment, get settled, and we will begin in a moment.
Testing. Can you all hear me?
We can, Debbie. Thank you.
Good. Very good.
Some more folks coming in, admitting them from the waiting room. Thank you for making time on your Saturday morning to join us and talk about the future of Congress Heights. We appreciate it. We're going to give folks just one more minute to get settled, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Gabe. How are you?
Morning. How are you?
Doing well. So as folks enter, welcome. I think a lot of you are probably used to Zoom at this point, but just wanted to offer a reminder, if you're comfortable, we'd love you to update your name on Zoom, and you can do that by, if you're on a desktop, hovering over the three little dots in the blue box, and you can see an option to rename. We'd love to have your name there if you don't already have it set. So please go ahead and do that. And you should also be seeing a slide presentation, the beginning of a slide presentation in your screen as well. We're going to get to that in a second. But let me go ahead and get us started here and kick us off. Welcome. Thank you again for taking the time this morning. We have a great conversation lined up for you. And we're going to be talking about the Congress Heights neighborhood and the small area plan that I think many of you have been participating in up to this point, and we welcome you back for this sort of next phase of the conversation. My name is Josh Lasky. I'm with a firm called Link Strategic Partners. We have the privilege of working alongside the Office of Planning to help facilitate some of these dialogues with community members to shape the small area plan. So we're gonna get into sort of the meat of the conversation today in just a little bit. We'll have a little bit of time to give you an overview of kind of where we've been with this conversation around the SAP, around the small area plan. We're going to give you sort of the context and the timeline. And then we're going to welcome in some new folks who've joined the effort recently from Cunningham Quill. They're an architecture and urban design firm.
Do you mind if we listen to this?
And they're I'm going to go ahead and mute folks for just a moment so there's no background noise. Nothing personal. We'll let folks come off mute in just a little bit. But we're going to share some observations or their observations about the neighborhood, about design, about public space and some buildings and some structures. And then maybe share a few recommendations about where we could go in the future. But we're going to reserve a whole big chunk of time for you all to provide your feedback, your thoughts, ask your questions, voice your concerns about how things exist now, how you experience your neighborhood, and how we might shape things going forward in the future. So I've got a couple of folks here on the phone. I'll just introduce them really quick. I've got Ernest Boykin from Link. Give a quick wave, Ernest. And Jamal Holtz from my team. But Felicia, maybe I'll pass to you to do quick intros of the folks from Office of Planning who are here joining us.
Awesome. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Felicia Wilson. I'm with the DC Office of Planning and Neighborhood Planning, and I am managing this project. With us today, there's a lot of faces on my screen. We have Deborah Crane Kemp, also Neighborhood Planning. We have Melissa Bird, who is our associate director, is my boss in neighborhood planning. We have Rita Abu Samra, is also with Office of Planning, but she's with our design division, so she'll be doing some presenting with us today. And I'm trying to, am I missing anyone? Oh, Ashley. There you are. Hey, Ashley. We have Ashley here also, and she and Debbie are working with us for our engagement effort, and they are both with neighborhood planning. Am I missing anyone else in neighborhood planning? I'm scrolling through, but I think I caught everyone, but please speak up if I have not. Also on the line, we have Jamie Fear of DC Health, and we've been working with her to develop a health equity analysis for the plan recommendations. We have Gabe Oniador from DDOT, and he's been working with us on our interagency working group. Has been very involved, so thank you, Gabe, for joining us. And I'm trying to see if there's anyone else from district government, and I think I've gotten everyone, but if not, please speak up now.
Perfect, Felicia, thank you. And then I just want to make sure we have a little bit of time for Lee, for you to introduce yourself and just introduce the folks from your team who are joining us today.
Thank you. Lost the screen there for a moment, so thank you, Josh. Joining us today from Cunningham Quill Architects is Nandor Mitrasak, Adam Chaney, and David Otenyo, who is a member of our team and has been heavily involved in this effort, but is with his family today for family graduation. So he passes on hello to everybody, but could not be with us for family engagement. So we look forward to presenting in a few minutes.
Thanks, Lee. So we're going to kick things off just by kind of setting the stage of where we are with the small area plan, providing some context. And then we're going to go into a little bit about a survey that Rita's been working on community design. And then we're going to talk about some of those observations and maybe some recommendations about Congress Heights from Lee and his team. So I am going to pass over to Felicia, who's going to sort of set the stage and give that context for the plan.
Awesome. So good morning. Thank you all for joining us bright and early on this Saturday. Let's just get started just to welcome you all to the Urban Design Community Workshop. We can actually go to the next slide. Today, our agenda is very simple. We will start off just catching up. Many of you we've seen in many meetings, and we're very grateful for that. A couple of new faces. So we're going to talk a little bit about the small area plan, its purpose, and also the purpose of this specific discussion around urban design. We will then dive into our public realm interventions and the urban design interventions, and then we will kind of summarize everything that we've heard and then talk about next steps. So our objectives today are to discuss the existing urban design conditions throughout the community. We will also be discussing urban design strategies. We have heard a lot about safety and comfort. So those are the kind of the things that we'll be getting at today. And then by the end of this meeting, we'll be on our way to being prepared for developing actual urban design recommendations. So if you're here, I don't know if we're up live yet, but if you can see this, please join us on Zoom. The link is here and it's also on the website. And you can provide feedback through the comment box. You can raise your hand. If you just unmute yourself, or we will typically see and be able to call on you. On public input, if you want to participate by phone, you can just dial 855-925-2801. The PIN is 9965. That'll get you to this meeting. Press the star button and then 3 to join the caller queue, and we'll be able to take your verbal comments. But it's easier to just join the Zoom. So see you here on the Zoom momentarily. So quickly about the small area plan. On this slide, you'll see the red boundary is our study area for the Congress Heights small area plan. It does include St. Elizabeth. We are not making land use recommendations for St. Elizabeth. It has a master plan, and this plan does not have the power to amend it. But it is part of a critical piece of the change that we are already starting to see in the community. And so it's definitely part of our conversation. Purpose of the small area plan is to identify and respond to place-based issues, issues around the built environment, issues relating to development. So that is our primary focus. And you'll see for this meeting that we're really largely talking about the physical aspects of the Congress Heights community today. Go back, please. The small area plan also outlines a community vision, your community vision for future private development and investment. And then it also creates a framework and an opportunity for us in the community to work with our partner agencies to outline community need for future study and public investment. So this is a framework for both public and private investment. So as I mentioned before, we've seen many of you in several meetings, and I really just wanted to thank you for following us along on this journey. It's been very interesting and sometimes challenging because we are in a pandemic. And so we've had to learn to engage differently. As I know, many of you are service providers and have had to do the same thing. And so we appreciate you just sticking with us through this process. We are at the end of plan development. This is our last set of recommendations that we'll be developing before we develop a draft. That draft will be public and our legislative process will begin. That includes a public comment period, a mayoral hearing. Ultimately, the council will review and approve this plan. And then once it's approved, we can start implementing the plan itself. And so that will consist of convening a neighborhood implementation committee and coordinating with our partner agencies to actually do the things that are outlined in the plan. And so I want to just recap our focus areas. We have several of them, and I want to just highlight kind of the goals related to these. So for parks, this small area plan is going to establish a framework to guide development based on these goals, and these goals have been developed through talking with you all, talking with your neighbors, working with our community advisory committee and our interagency working group. And so they include safe, well-maintained and vibrant public streets and parks. It includes inclusive historic commemoration, celebrations, and public art that amplify local history and culture. It includes creating more opportunities for affordable, attainable, and diverse home ownership and rental opportunities. So that includes, housing that's suitable for families, multi-generational households, et cetera. We also are focusing on delivering facilities that are accessible and responsive to community needs, and are also programmed to improve holistic well-being. We are, through this plan, are supporting improved access to business development and higher paying career opportunities. And over all of these, finally, transportation, we're using this plan as an opportunity to create recommendations for safer travel, safer access. We are aware of the child that was hit yesterday. And those tragedies are things that can be avoided and are impacted by our built environment and our transportation environment. And so that's an issue that we wish to address. Also access, being able to get where you need to go, to work, to see family, to go shopping, whatever it is, efficiently. It's not enough that it's just safe, but that everyone in Congress Heights deserves to have efficient travel options as well. And all of these focus areas are really tied to social equity and community resilience. We have been developing this plan with an equity lens. If you take a look at our recommendations online, which we'll link to at the end, if you haven't gotten a chance to see, we are centering voices of longtime residents, our Black residents, vulnerable residents that are living below the poverty line. And so that is the focus of this plan. And so today we are tying those goals to urban design. For those of you that are not aware, urban design really is a term that describes relationship between buildings, streets, and open spaces. It's everything that you experience collectively outside when you're in your neighborhood and moving through your neighborhood. By developing recommendations for urban design, we can develop guidance for future development. And what that allows for is thoughtful infill development. So where we have vacancies, where we have land that's underutilized and we have owners that are thinking about doing something with it, urban design strategies can help guide what that looks like. And it's an opportunity to reflect kind of what you all want to see, what type of development you're comfortable with, what type of new construction you're comfortable with. And ultimately our goal here is to develop a design strategies that meets your needs for increasing retail diversity, which you've heard a lot about throughout this process from all of you. Encouraging a thriving public realm, one, again, that is safe, one that's accessible to everyone and family friendly. That means that we're developing pedestrian friendly streetscapes so that it is comfortable to walk. There's enough shade. There's enough space on the sidewalks for people with strollers to pass, for people who maybe are in a wheelchair to get around. And also very critically, this goal is to anchor our community center, particularly along MLK Avenue, as a destination. And so I don't know if you all have been places where you're like, oh, this doesn't really feel like it's someplace, but then you've been places where like, oh, this really feels like a destination. And urban design makes the difference, and that is what we're looking to achieve here. And I see that we have a hand up. As I can take any questions right now related to kind of the introduction piece. Ms. Jones. Ms. Brenda Jones, would you like to speak? I see your hand is up.
It may have been an unintentional hand, but I want to confirm that. I know Ms. Jones looks like she's on the go, so.
Okay, hold on, Ms. Jones, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, great. I'm so sorry. I got a hair appointment that I'm trying to rush to. But I just wanted to say, I wanted to address that whole historic culture piece that as you all know about those pictures and on the pedestals up and down U Street. If we can start from the Native Americans who lived in the area of Congress Heights through other, coming up to other cultures that moved in, have it around, it would be a wonderful thing to bring pride to the community, I believe. Go ahead. And to real quick, and then I probably might have to get off.
Nope. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to add that I think we need to have pictures. Young people need to see where they are, who they are, where they came from. We need to just push this whole thing about history, about how great a people we are.
Those are actually really great ideas. And I think you actually really like some of the recommendations we already have for historic and cultural preservation. So we're working on kind of the how internally with our historic preservationists. And so there may be an opportunity to loop you into some of the work we're doing, Ms. Jones.
Okay, great. It's a good thing. I wish it could be all over the ward, quite frankly. So again, I think that's lacking, and particularly with our young people, having any hope for the future, or what is it for them? Who are they? So that's my piece right now. Thank you, and good morning, everybody.
Thank you so much. Those are some great points.
Okay. Ms. Jones, appreciate that, and also appreciate the commitment of getting on the meeting while on the way to the hair appointment. That's impressive.
That is dedication.
I wanna before we start getting into conversation, because I know there's a lot of thoughts, I want to make sure we get through a few other pieces of our agenda, and then we're going to open it up and have lots of time. But Felicia, I think this might have been your last slide. Is that right? And we'll ask Rita to talk about the survey.
Yeah, but there is I see Ms. Molly Alexander has her hand up. Ms. Alexander, do you have any questions about the plan process that we can answer now?
Yes. Well, it's just I'm gonna have a quick thing to say. That was Ms. Jones that just spoke just now. That had made a comment. I just want to make sure I got her name right.
Yes.
Well, I'm from Congress Heights, and I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. And I would like to say that the points that she just made, well, my organization is Heavenly Urban Nature Gardens in Congress Heights. So every day I work with the children and the residents to teach them how to grow healthy food, health and wellness every day. And so the comments that she made about the indigenous piece, the historical value, youth is our main focus in families. And everything that she said was very on point. And that's the climate and atmosphere and the thinking of the people of Ward 8. And I have not yet to hear a public official state those things that she stated. But if you listen closely to the things that she's saying, she's speaking from the heart and the pulse of the people of Congress Heights. And as a food leader in food security and working with the youth, she is absolutely right. If you can kind of think of the things that she's saying, and maybe some kind of way we can incorporate the pulse of the people, I think that everyone will get what they need.
Thank you, and you're absolutely right. And I think that when we as part of the urban design discussion, it's actually very poignant for this conversation, because it's part of the urban design discussion that really is about capturing the pulse of the community and manifesting that physically in the neighborhood space.
Very, very helpful, Molly. I appreciate it. And I hope that people bring their spirit, you know, and you know, a part of their you know, direct experience in the neighborhood to the conversation. We want that feedback. We need the feedback so that this plan can be what, you know, something that all of us can be proud of. So I appreciate you sort of helping us set the tone there. Thank you.
Welcome.
Rita, I'm going to ask you to talk about another way that people can offer their feedback and participate in the public process. We have a survey, that's right.
Yes, thank you, Josh and everyone. So I guess for the next few minutes, I'm going to guide everyone through a survey. We created this survey based on previous conversations that we've had with the community, where certain issues came up, or I guess maybe concerns about safety in public spaces, maybe a desire for more comfort in Congress Heights public spaces, and then more activation or public space activities, outdoor activities that the community, you know, can engage in or maybe create yourselves. And we just kind of wanted to follow up on those conversations that we've had with you and maybe create a picture survey where we can take a look at some pictures together, and then you can choose what you would like to see in some of the key spaces that also came up in previous conversations in the neighborhood. For those who are familiar with the public input page, I'm going to share my screen in a second. That's okay, Josh, right? Just maybe to guide everyone through this. I am going to send a link to the survey. Did you?
Yep, it's in the chat. So if you open the chat and you can click on the link there, and it's under the community design survey tab. It says new, so hopefully it'll draw your attention, but that is where we'll start.
Okay, so I'm getting a message. I'm trying to share my screen, and it says host disabled participant screen sharing. I think it's
went ahead and made you a co-host, gave you special privileges. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So.
And it may require you to actually take your screen share down for a moment. Yeah. And this is helpful so people know exactly how to access the survey. So thank you, Rita.
Can everyone see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So as I said, this is the public input Congress Heights Small Area Plan page. This is the tab that Felicia was referring to. It says new community design survey. And then it's going to be 5 questions just for everyone to know. It's not a really lengthy survey, but it really hits the important points, we think. Again, we looked at 5 key locations in the neighborhood. Is everyone, I guess maybe should just give like a couple of minutes so everyone connects to this, or
I think if people are able to access this while we're on the call, that's great. If they don't feel comfortable, if they don't have time right now, I think just showing them kind of how to get to it is great, so they can do that when they're ready. But this is helpful. Thank you.
So, I'm just gonna go ahead and start then. So the first question is related to the Plaza by the businesses on MLK Junior Avenue Southeast. This is a picture of the existing conditions at the Plaza right now. This is going to be the same structure for all of the questions, where, as I said, we'll show a picture of what the space looks like now. And then we're going to ask you how you wish that it looked. So you can choose more than one option for all of the questions. You don't necessarily need to pick one thing over the other. If you are happy with how the space looks now, then feel free to select I like it the way it is. This option will exist also for all of the questions. So for this first space, the options are maybe wanting to see more events and outdoor activities like this, like the event with the I guess that happened a while ago with the Office of Planning with the chalk and the children just drawing on in the plaza. Another option is seeing more outdoor dining. So as you know, this plaza is I guess adjacent to businesses over here. And so maybe wanting to see more sidewalk cafes on this plaza, or a portion of this plaza. Obviously, not the whole thing. We would still, it would still be available for pedestrians and other types of activities, because as you may all know, public space is shared by everyone. We have several users in public space, and we're always careful when we're planning for a certain type of design or activity there. We want to make sure that we include everyone and we don't take away anyone's right to use the space. The fourth option is seeing more street improvements, including better sidewalks, continuous trees for shading, public benches, so more seating opportunities, bicycle and scooter amenities, which there's already some bike racks there, but maybe seeing that developed a little bit more, trash receptacles, etc. Anything really you can think of in terms of public space amenities will fall there. Again, you can pick all three options. You can pick two of them, you can pick one of them. You can choose, that you like the way that the plaza looks now and you really don't want to see anything else happen there. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is the open spaces between neighboring residential buildings. This is also an issue that came up before, where maybe some folks felt that they didn't feel that these spaces, were safe or maybe had any added value to, I guess, these residential spaces. These can be alleys or just like leftover spaces, leftover open spaces. So for this question, this is an example of how these spaces look. And then again, you have the option to choose that you like the way these spaces look now. You don't want anything else done to them. And then another option is that you want to see more lighting and more maybe creative lighting. So this can be festival lights, or I don't know, just any other type of creative lighting that will, add more lighting to the space, but also have that, creative side that adds more to the design of the space and the comfort to some extent. And then another option that we have here, we only have three options for this one, is see more events and outdoor activities happen in the alleys. And again, this is an alley activation event that we did a while ago. So this just shows you an example of, self-activation that happened in the neighborhood. The third location are the streets along Malcolm X Avenue and MLK Jr. Avenue. So that would be the intersection and then the streets. And we're specifically talking about the right-of-way here. So like the streets and the sidewalks and all, like that space that usually people use to go from like point A to point B, but maybe in this case, we're looking at making the space safer or more comfortable. We know that there's also a safety issue on those streets, from previous accidents. And also, I think for this one, maybe like all three topics that were previously mentioned, comfort, safety, and activation maybe come into play. So you may say again that you like the way the space looks. You may say that you want more outdoor dining, just like what's been going on across the city through maybe the street view program, or just like regular sidewalk cafes since before the pandemic. I would like to hear from you if that is something that you would be interested in. So seeing more outdoor dining that can happen on the sidewalk, or it can also happen in the parking lane, which is what we call parklets, or it can be both. So this is an option for streetscape activation. And then another option is seeing occasional in-street events. So that will be occasional street closures, to traffic. It can be full street closures. It can be partial street closures. We're not saying that, we're just gonna not let cars through the whole time, but it's just an example of like occasional events that can happen that the community can, participate in. And then the fourth option is, again, seeing more streetscape improvements. So from the design perspective, seeing more streetscape improvements that contribute to safety and comfort. So this will include a continuous row of trees, more vegetation, and we are emphasizing the vegetation and the row of trees because, as you see in this example, in this picture, this usually helps as a traffic calming measure, and it helps basically shield the pedestrian from the traffic. So this will address safety on that end. It also helps with shading, obviously. I know that when I was personally in Congress Heights with the team, we were walking on that intersection, and then there was a portion, I guess, on one block, there was not sufficient shading. So it was sunny on that day, and it was very hot. And then as soon as, you know, we crossed on the crosswalk to another block on that street, there was, you know, just like there were more trees there. So we kind of stood in the shade to talk, and it just felt very comfortable. So that is what we're talking about when we're talking about, you know, safety, I guess, comfort, the comfort side of this. Then there's also other options for streetscape improvements that will fit within this, if you make the selection, are more public benches, obviously, for seating, and then bicycle and scooter amenities, and then any other, you know, options or traffic calming measures. So moving on to the fourth location. So this will be the park at the Malcolm X and MLK Avenue Junior intersection. So again, a picture of what it looks like now. So you can again say that you like the way it is. We do, you know, understand that this park is underutilized, and we do think that it is a great amenity for the neighborhood. And it would be, you know, I guess it would be just interesting and beneficial for everyone if this space were to be utilized and people felt, you know, safe and welcome to linger in it. When we think of public spaces, these public spaces sometimes are just spaces that we go through, just, you know, and on our way somewhere else. But then a successful public space, and again, it depends on the type of public space, but a park like this one, I guess, from a public life or quality or public space quality perspective, we usually aim at people just like going there and then staying and lingering in the space and just like enjoying it, because it is an amenity, as I mentioned. So did I just draw on this? I don't know, I have like yellow. I don't know. Anyway, we'll just ignore that. So yeah, you can choose to say, you know, I like the park the way it is. And then you can say that you want to see more commemorative art or other forms of public art, like in this example. So when we say commemorative art, we're just talking about commemorating maybe like historic figures or the history of the neighborhood. We know that this is also something that came up in previous discussions. So we listened when you mentioned that, and basically the importance of maintaining the history of the space, and then basically what makes Congress Heights. And so one form of doing this, and it's actually part of a program that we developed the past year or two at the Office of Planning, is just commemorating important events or figures or you know, just like spaces in the district. And so this is where that option fits in. So seeing more commemorative art or other form of, you know, commemoration in that space, so that, you know, people can look at it and then just, you know, identify automatically. Residents can identify automatically with it. Visitors, you know, can understand more about the neighborhood. And then another option is wanting to see more outdoor activities. Again, in this park, an example of an activity could be a market or a farmer's market. So this could happen, you know, weekly or just like, it depends. Every farmer's market is different, but just having like maybe a market that people can go to and that they know that this on this day and this, you know, like on this month and on this day, like there's a market, and then just kind of gives an additional reason to linger in this park. The fourth option is seeing more improvements again, and then this would include more trees. So this park has a fair amount of trees, but then maybe you're looking at, you know, whether it's all shaded, or that would require obviously a longer, or I guess more a study just to understand it further. But for now, just wanting to hear what you think. Maybe you think that the park needs more trees, more shading, more benches under these trees, so more shaded benches. maybe better lighting, just anything you can think of in terms of the improvement of the physical aspect of the park and the design of the park. So the fifth and final location is the plaza surrounding the Congress Heights Metro Station. I know that this is going to we're specifically talking about the public, the outdoor, like the public space surrounding it. Metro stations differ across the district. Some stations have plazas, some don't have plazas. This is something we look at in our comprehensive plan as well. This metro station has a sufficient amount around this, sufficient space, sorry, around it. And it's an open space. It's a space that is not really utilized. So we're just, wanting to know if, again, you may say you like it the way it is as an option, but then maybe you want to see more shaded seating opportunities. So maybe, especially with the recent delays that have been going on with the metro, maybe instead of just like sitting downstairs, waiting for the train, maybe someone would want to sit outside if it's nice. Maybe you want more shaded seating opportunities. It doesn't only have to be utilized by people wanting to take the metro. It can be utilized. It can become like this space where community members meet and then just like hang out. This is an example of a comparable space where there are benches and then there's community members meeting there all the time. So this is the option of seeing more shaded seating. And then another option is seeing more public art. This includes playable art. So when we say playable art, we refer to as it's exactly as it sounds. We refer to art that children or adults or older adults or anyone really can play with. This is an example here, and it will just be inviting for people to utilize and stay in the space more. So this wraps up the 5 locations. We do have an additional question just for our reference, which is, if you would like to give us that information, just so that we understand more about what people want, because we do understand that not everyone wants the same thing. Everyone is their own person. Everyone has their different experiences depending on where they live and the spaces that they visit. So if you can just, share with us, there's an option for you to kind of go to this map and then just like set a location for the closest point to where you live. You don't have to give us your exact address, is not what we're asking for. Yeah, you can also type in your primary street or your nearest cross street or both. And then just give us a little bit of information about what part of the neighborhood you live in. So that wraps up this section. If you took the survey as I was guiding you through it, then great. If you would like to take it later, then that's also something that you can do. I don't know, Josh, and if you want to take over and maybe just say so I don't know if you wanted to like maybe share some of the findings later on, or just I'll leave that up to you. So thank you, everyone.
Rita, really, really helpful. And as I mentioned, this is just one more option for community members to express your opinion, share your thoughts, share your ideas. And these are areas that need attention. So thank you, Rita, for going through that. And we'll drop the link to the survey into the chat one more time so people have it. Dr. Adams, I saw that you had your hand up kind of early on. Thanks for your patience. Did you have a question related to the survey? What can we answer for you at this time?
Yeah, I do. And thank you so much for this opportunity and all the work that's gone into this. I know it's a lot. Just a little bit of feedback, and I think I've given this before, in that even in this survey, there isn't any place to add comments. So I don't see what I want here.
So that's helpful. I know that there are some more open-ended options to provide feedback on the plan. Felicia, do you want to highlight that? And maybe is there a way to add kind of an open-ended comment section with the survey that may or may not be possible? What are the options for people to provide kind of open-ended types of feedback?
Thank you. Thanks for that feedback, Dr. Adams. So what we can do is add an other option, or just very simply just add an open comment option. But we can have that done by the end of the meeting, so that everyone's opinions can be captured. Thank you for catching that.
You're welcome. And I do want to say, I do understand how involved this is, but it's going to cause, I'm going to just say a backlash if you don't do that. Because the way it's presented, this is not a balanced survey. The way it's presented is pick from these, and if none of these work, I feel like you haven't heard me.
That's fair. Thank you. Yeah, we definitely want to make sure that everyone's opinions are captured. And I think it was just an oversight. So thank you for
And
catching
I
that.
understand that. My other question is, of these things that you presented, is this something that the residents have recommended?
Yes, so all of the options in the survey came from our focus group meetings earlier in the year, and also our workshop meetings in the summertime. So we've heard everything from, oh, we want more outdoor dining. We've heard we want better lighting, safer lighting. We've heard, oh, we need places to sit, walking up and down the hills, especially going to Oxmoor Park. And so nothing that we've shown is just from our own kind of imagination. It's all feedback from what we've already heard from the community.
Absolutely. And the reason why I asked that question is because I assume that, but it's important to say.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's very important to say. Thank you. Yeah, everything as we go forward, the things you see should reflect what we've already heard. So it's good to check on that and to check it occasionally. So thank you, Dr. Adams. Appreciate that feedback. Molly, you had your hand up as well.
Oh, yes, I did. Speaking on what the last person said about, have you spoken to the people and the organizations in Congress Heights? I'm not saying that you haven't. I don't really understand if you have, but my organization works outside every day, and primarily with food insecurity, helping people to train them how to make their own food, health and wellness, teaching them about healthy eating, specifically for youth, young adults, and families. I've never seen you guys. I'm not saying you're not there, but we are constantly outside. We even lead like prayer groups at the park. I mean, and I've never seen any of you guys or heard of it. And so I'm not saying you're not doing it, but I'm saying if you guys can't get to the youth on foot and walk and talk to these people, or even I can help you get to that point if you're willing to work with my organization, you've got to hear the youth's voices, because if their voices are not heard, they're going to be shut out yet again in the last place where they have a voice. Congress Heights is like that last place. And it's like if you come in and you just do all these things and you don't and get the input and the pulse of the people, then it's just, you're just doing a bunch of things to make it look a certain way, but you're not reaching the people that need to be reached. That's just what I have to say.
Thank you. I'm glad that you brought that up. We actually we worked with the Ward 8 Community Economic Development Partnership to lead a youth engagement workshop. We have been out as it's gotten safer to do canvassing. We tend not to talk to students leaving school, children on the street, because it's a little weird and we don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. So we did create that space to actually engage youth. I actually think one of our photos is from that event, but we'd love to work more closely with your organization. If you could you could either email it to us, congressheightsplans@dc.gov, or you could drop your information in the chat, and you can send it privately if you don't want to put everything out there. That's totally fine. We'd love to connect with you so we can engage youth even more. So I appreciate that offer.
And I'll echo that, Felicia. Molly, thank you for coming with the feedback and then also making the offer to support. You know, I think OP does a lot. They've got good support, but they can't talk to everyone, and that's why they need partners like your group. So thank you. And I think, you know, Felicia, it's great that you're going to follow up and make sure that we're activating as many networks as we can to hear from as many people and get as many voices included as we can. So thank you. Good feedback, and thank you for the offer. I want to move us forward and use as much of the time we have left to hear from Cunningham Quill and then get right into the conversation. So Adam, you've got your screen share started. There's going to be a few slides, and then we're going to have space for comments and discussion, and then go back into some slides. And so we're going to get into a rhythm here. But Lee, why don't you go ahead? I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Josh. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this community meeting and Charette. We're going to, again, my name is Lee Quill from Cunningham Quill. We're gonna, between the three of us, Nandor, Adam and myself, we're going to talk about 4 topic areas that address issues that have come up that we've been speaking with OP about and with members in the community. We've been on the ground quite a bit here. Our office is in Washington, so we practice in Washington, but in particular in Congress Heights, we've spent a lot of time over there over the last few years and recently with this effort. So we're going to talk about some observations that we've seen. We're going to talk about 4 kind of general topic areas that came up as major areas to be discussed. Then we'll have, and the way it's going to be broken down is we will talk about a particular area or topic area, and then we're going to do a break to have discussion about that particular area at that particular time, so that we can have a discussion about the topic, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So you move to the next slide. The first thing we're going to talk about is our team observations from our community walks. And I'm going to turn this over to Nandor to start that. Nandor?
Thanks, Lee. And it's a pleasure to meet everyone this morning. And I guess it's this afternoon shortly. Next slide. I was really excited when Ms. Jones and Ms. Alexander talked about, getting the pulse of the community. I think that's really important to the foundation of this project. And we on the design team have been conscious of that. We took this last Tuesday, we took 4 hours in the afternoon and kind of walked around the neighborhood and met with some of the community members, kind of a boots on the ground type of experience, and really just kind of walked around and listened to the community, observed. It was great to see the kids coming out of school that afternoon and kind of walking home and biking home and just, getting, again, this pulse of the community, getting a sense of kind of the everyday activities, where are the kind of the points of interest, where are the key intersections, walking through the residential neighborhoods themselves, just kind of observing the streetscape and just kind of taking notes and really listening. Next slide. And we've also been doing our research on what's been happening. I think there's been a lot of internal and city investment in the Congress Heights neighborhood. It's really important neighborhood historically and today within the district. And things like the jazz series, I think we've heard positive feedback on that. There's also this renewed focus on St. Elizabeth's campus, and there's a lot going on there from the city side. Next slide. There's the new Whitman Walker Clinic. We saw it, and as we all know, it's under construction right now, and then the new townhouses next to it. So, on the campus adjacent to Congress Heights, there's a lot of activity, a lot of new construction, a lot of new energy coming along, and we want to make sure that a lot of that energy and hopefully positive outcomes bleed over and come over to the Congress Heights neighborhood as well. And there's some integration of some of these positive investments. Next slide. We've been studying what the community has said about their vision. We've heard a need for communities serving retail and places to dine and shop and eat and have better food options, things like sit-down dining and outdoor seating for dining. So we're taking that into consideration. Next slide. We've also heard about street activating uses, getting things like food markets or fresh food. I think we even heard that this morning already. Getting these food options to the table. So we do have some ideas today that we'll present to you shortly. But I think there's a strong sense of community. That's one of the takeaways we found, that people are really proud of their neighborhood, proud of where they come from. Even kids growing into adults, they have roots in this neighborhood. It's really impressive to see. Next slide. So we're going to transition to design strategies. Some of this background research and observations are leading us to already some ideas. Next slide. We've set this up with what we're calling a framework. We put together this diagram to kind of show maybe 4 areas of conversations today. The first one being MLK Jr. commercial corridor. This is a pretty, we'll say a half-mile stretch of MLK Jr. Avenue. And it's really important. It's historically been the heart of the community. It has a lot of great history and focus. You see a lot of people walking the streets, and the parks are heavily used. A lot of the key elementary and middle schools are kind of located along this corridor. This will always be kind of one of the important nodes of the community. And we want to talk with you all today about that. The next one is the Metro and Alabama Avenue kind of area. You know, there's a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of focus on St. Elizabeth's from the city and kind of that campus redevelopment. But then on the private sector side and on kind of with all those properties along Alabama Avenue, there's a lot of renewed interest there as well. So that will emerge as a new and exciting area as time goes on. We also want to talk about connectivity and walkability within the neighborhoods themselves. We walked through the residential neighborhoods and observed and took notes, and there are a lot of and we heard a few interesting feedback observations from the community as well. So we want to kind of get that out in front of you today and talk about that. And lastly, increasing housing choices. We've been observing the housing shortage within the district, at large, but specifically to the Congress Heights neighborhood. And, really one of the key focuses of this plan is to increase choice and affordable housing. Next slide. So I'm going to hand it over to Adam, who will talk about our first kind of conversation idea. Adam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Chaney. I'm an urban designer at Cunningham Quilg Architects. I wanted to start off just talking about Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue Southeast. It's that, as Nandor said, it's your vibrant community heart you have now. And we're really here to brainstorm with you and along with read a survey, kind of gather information and really make this a better designed place for you to serve you. And we started with looking at some of your community visioning statements that really tied into, hold on, let me make sure it's, there you go. Some of your community visioning statements that really honed in on design and honed in on this commercial corridor. In past community meetings and engagement, you talked about, like Nandor said, sit down dining pop-ups, maybe with coordination of food trucks and markets, technical assistance for existing Black-owned businesses, safe street activating uses so people feel comfortable.
I got it back on down.
Feel comfortable to use this great. There's already great public spaces, but sometimes it just needs to be activated a little bit more. And helping create community serving retail and small format big box retailers that can really serve this heart of the community. We heard about supporting the existing business community and workforce by maybe facilitating the development of an incubator or accelerator. Capturing these new opportunities like Nandor was talking about right along St. Elizabeth's. You're having a new hospital, you're having new clinics, you're having all these new workers coming in and new residents coming in at times, and really capturing those and linking those to this corridor and having it kind of work in synergy with each other. And in part of that, there is a lot of energy. And so funneling resources to protect from displacement. We're urban designers, we're architects, and we're here also to kind of give you our lens that we see to help make great spaces. And, throughout the corridor, you have vacant lots, you have, fenced off spaces, you have curb cuts where people are driving in and out that are blocking people with wheelchairs or, kids walking and making it unsafe to walk down the street. And these vacant lots along MLK Avenue, they may change over time. A lot of these are privately owned. This is not something we have direct influence on saying you have to put, retail here, housing there, green spaces there. But this is our chance, this is your chance in this brainstorming session to start to say, what if there was change to happen, if these vacant lots were different, how could they serve the community with affordable housing, with maybe some of these pop-up retail spaces or permanent retail spaces, civic spaces, art, food resources. These are those opportunity moments along the corridor. And just to give you a little bit of background, I don't want to geek out too much on zoning, but you're in a MU4 zone, which the city, and OP and, it's meant to be this pedestrian oriented streetscape that's moderate Main Street kind of level density that supports a mixture of housing, retail, and that can kind of serve as a main street for the community. It already is a main street, but that's the zoning that we're working with. And the existing heights that are allowed, if a property owner tomorrow wanted to submit an application, they probably would end up in about the 5-story range. So we started mapping the corridor and really looking at where are there parking lots that are empty, or places where the community could start to input their vision. We noted, starting from the top, starting at kind of the Rise Center, you have green space, which the city has already put out for an RFP, but to be developed in the future. So this would start to anchor that northern edge that right now really doesn't interact with MLK Boulevard that much. There was a fence around St. Elizabeth's for the longest time. And that's going to start to link into this new, link in with retail or whatever y'all envision for this corridor. There's infill parking lots throughout, sometimes behind buildings, sometimes along the street, which could be activated in different ways to bring that community serving retail or community serving housing. There's different cultural assets that we noted. I think a lot of people maybe don't realize, or maybe some people do, but there was a historic theater along MLK Jr. Avenue. And, as architects, we were honing in and we're like, oh, what a beautiful old building. You have these amazing buildings that sometimes are not really, that are their existing uses or the way that it's treated. You don't really know they're there all the time. And you have a great plaza, starting down at that's already really working. And maybe, through work with Rita's survey, through work with engagement through this process, we can start to say, hey, we have these awesome spaces. Let's make them work better and serve the community better. So here's an example of, with the existing zoning and with thinking through this, what could happen. This isn't a great, streetscape. You have neighborhood serving, restaurant, China, and deli. You have kind of a typical block where you have 1-story retail along the front. What we've seen, a lot of times is that's behind it's where you get a lot of opportunities for really careful, sensitively put housing. And, we're urban designers. There's public input on if this is, affordable, how affordable, but we're really talking about how it relates to the street and about keeping those businesses, keeping that streetscape, but then, carefully inserting maybe some really needed, housing for people of all different types. And then also helping in doing that, restore or improve the storefronts so that those retail businesses maybe have outdoor seating, maybe you have better street trees. So kind of improving the retail streetscape above. So this is just one example along that corridor of kind of maybe how that might look and feel over time. The next slide shows, there's also these infill lots. There's all these opportunities for new housing, new retail opportunities, new streetscape improvements. And often when property owners or nonprofits themselves, sometimes the lots are owned by nonprofits, they decide to bring in affordable housing. They decide to bring in new market rate housing. They try to bring in new retail. And when they do that, they often help improve the streetscape. And this is where we can really start to talk to them about, hey, you're improving the streetscape. We want to see more street trees. We want to see more seating outside. And from an urban design perspective, having these lots have a consistent streetscape, start to make it feel more welcoming. It starts to slow down traffic. You're driving down the road and you look up and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in a neighborhood. It's not a fenced in barrier. Pedestrians have a safer walking path because, as it comes in, maybe the sidewalk is improved. Maybe it's become better lighting, a better welcoming environment. And one thing, and these are just general opportunities on the corridor, but we really wanted to hone down on your comments about food opportunities, about retail opportunities for the existing awesome creative energy, awesome cultural vibrancy you have on the corridor. These spaces could be maybe that space where you have that incubator space you're talking about, maybe that place where retail that you have awesome entrepreneurs on the corridor, but maybe they don't have the commercial food kitchen to develop their recipes and start serving in that, food hall or market. And we looked at places like Mixed Food Hall in Brentwood, which is a local minority entrepreneur-centered market and retail space, or in farther afield in DeSoto, Texas, there's a similar space called DeSoto Grow. And maybe it doesn't just need to be a food incubator space. Maybe it can be a community resiliency hall. I think we heard a lot about, there's a lot of great changes, these great medical facilities, these great new workforce, these great new jobs, opportunities in the neighborhood, but people don't always know what opportunities they can be linked to. So maybe there's some sort of office or space for the nonprofits to come together and say a one-stop shop to kind of link people to affordable housing that's coming in, or retail support. These infill lots also, depending on the size and shape, maybe there's opportunities for that daycare that's really needed for the community. Art spaces, we talked about community gardens, other support. And as urban designers, not every lot, not every shape and size of a building can host things like this. Some of the spaces are large enough to really support all the retail and housing needs that y'all have outlined as necessary for your community, and some areas maybe don't work quite as well. And I mentioned this earlier, one cultural resource that we were just really inspired by was this the existing Congress Heights Theater. It's it has the Mart Flicker in front. It's owned by a private property owner. It's not like necessarily we can swoop in and say we want this to be turned into a food incubator space tomorrow or anything like that. But it would be an awesome opportunity to kind of reinvent what is a large format building. You could imagine it being turned into something that serves the community, but right anchored along your green spaces along Shepherd's Parkway. But maybe those aren't the spaces that are available. I think there's temporary pop-ups, like we were talking about, farmers markets, incubator spaces, and vacant lots and food trucks in the short term. And maybe there's also DC or nonprofit-owned spaces. There's so many awesome nonprofit organizations that really have a pulse on the community, really understand. And maybe there's a space there where we can start to put in that incubator space, bring in those retail opportunities that are really, really needed. So we wanted to kind of open this general brain. This is kind of our thoughts. Your community. We wanted to go move into a discussion. I'm going to pass it off to Josh to kind of lead this.
Thanks, Adam. And there's a lot of information here. And I also see there's a lot of comments coming through the chat. Thank you for that. If we need to go back to any of the slides we've seen before, as people want us to, we can. What I will do is I'll ask folks to use that hand function. I see we already have folks doing that, and then we can just hear from as many people as possible. We are a little bit crunched on time. I'm not going to cut anyone off, but we do have other areas we want to get to beyond the MLK corridor. So I will say that as we go into to hear from folks. But Ms. Connie Spinner, go ahead.
Thank you. I've been unmuted, I hope.
We can hear you.
Very good. I've got three things. Number one, there is nothing that you've mentioned that is typically urban. And for better or for worse, we are still urban. And we in this city are considered the most gentrified city in the country. We don't want that to happen east of the river. There are some issues that we have that are uniquely ours. The 37% of the individuals who are functionally illiterate in our city live east of the river in Ward 7 and Ward 8. They were also the last wards to get adult charter schools. Why is that important? Because the average nonprofit spends roughly between $3,500 and $5,000 per pupil for training or development. A charter gets $14,000. So the capacity we're the best kept secret in the city. And for the longest time, almost 15 years, we only existed west of the river. We now have 2 adult charter schools east of the river in Ward 7 and Ward 8, Academy of Hope and Community College Prep. We need to anchor them, bring them into this discussion, because we have the funding and the research on what it takes to do what we want to do. I'm concerned that more of the individuals in the neighborhood could participate, because everything was done electronically. And we are the least electronically capable part of the city when you look at capacity to use the internet. And I was concerned that we build and look at what we already have, that we don't go elsewhere in the country when we've got one of the best culinary arts programs for adults in the country right here at Carlos Rosario. You can go look at a state-of-the-art building. It is an adult charter. It feeds the restaurant industry. And it could be done east of the river in Ward 7 and Ward 8. So using what we have well, listening to the people who are already here is critically important. We serve roughly 600 students a year of that group that I talked about that was functionally illiterate. They need to be a part of this survey process. And if you will make the access available, we'll get it to our students and get you some data back.
Thank you, Ms. Benner, and thanks for kind of speaking up on behalf of CC Prep. We appreciate it, and we will absolutely work with you to reach some of the folks that you have connections to. That would be very helpful to get their voices involved.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. I saw Mustafa Abdul Salam. You had your hand raised. You want to come off mute?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Mustafa Abdul Salam. I'm the ANC Commissioner for 8C05 and the facilitator for the Ward 8 Community Economic Development planning process that's been underway for a couple of years. We've been working very closely with the planning department, very early in this process, because we have an opportunity to connect the small area planning for Congress Heights to a larger plan that talks about the whole Ward 8, because the limitations of the small area planning is that if the rest of the Ward 8 is not functional, if it's not connected economically to all the activity, then you have a core that might be functioning, but the rest of the community is not going to be there. So this Ward 8 plan is an opportunity to connect all the pieces. And I would like to agree with Ms. Spinner, and it's good to see her, that we got to create an opportunity to link all the pieces. It's just not enough to look at the physical structures and making physical change. The human capital is also important that we focus on. And what we suffer in Ward 8 is really a lack of coordination. We have a lot of the pieces, but everybody's been operating as in a vacuum or a silo. And that has not fared well for the community. And to really make Ward 8 work, we're going to have to find a way to get everybody who wants to stay in Ward 8 with the skills and education, the capacity to increase their income, which means that they can be able to afford to live in Ward 8. Because as much development we're talking about doing, with that comes, displacement, because everybody's not going to be able to pay for the rent as they increase. So I encourage you as designers, if you haven't already, become knowledgeable of the Ward 8 Community Economic Development Planning process, because it's resident driven. We have over 1,500 residents who have signed up and are participating. We have a very comprehensive approach that talks about linking healthcare and economic development. So if you're not aware of that, I think you miss an opportunity to talk about how this small area plan can link to the broader community. So, but I appreciate the effort. I'm really excited about getting to a place that we can actually begin to make sure that these plans coincide. You know, the Ward 8 plan is due in June of 2022. So there's going to be an opportunity as this plan evolves and is finalized, that we can make sure that as much as possible, we can try to create some seamless things with it. So I appreciate having the opportunity to share this. And if anybody wants some further information or would like to talk to me directly, my information is in the chat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mustafa. Appreciate it. And I'm glad you raised this issue of making sure that it's not just about more resources and more planning. It's about coordination. It's about alignment and connecting with other things happening. Thank you for raising that. Dr. Adams, I'll go back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Josh, for letting us have an opportunity to speak. One of the things that is kind of striking to me is that in agreement kind of with what's going on said before, is the looking at the outside structure. And I know there's been some efforts to bring people in, and I also know that it's a small representation, and that's something that definitely has to be addressed. What is as we do the work, I'm working also with Mustafa, and I'm here as a resident of Ward 8. As we do the work, one of the things that becomes more and more clear and paramount is the traumatization of the people in Ward 8. Due to the fact that others have come in and made decisions for the community. We hear this over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm seeing it in this particular presentation. And I'm surprised that there aren't more people of color making these observations. I think it's going to really not sit well with the larger community, that you say you want to be more aware of, benefit the residents, but if they're not being benefited economically through a process, a planning process, it's not only hypocritical, it re-traumatizes people, and it's not gonna be pretty. So you may say you have things figured out in the time frame that you have, but it will be slowed down even more when the people in this community are not in agreement. So I just want to say that, and if you're not aware, all of the other people that are on this line, there's a concept called FUBU, F-U-B-U. You might want to study it. For us, by us. It's empowering and it stabilizes the community. When you bring other people, I mean, we could work together. But when you just bring other people to make decisions, it's a formula for disaster. And I would like that to go on record. And I would like a copy of this recording. Thank you.
Dr. Adams, I so appreciate your comment. Genuinely, we are recording the meeting. It is part of what we will sort of put up and put forth as one of the resources that'll go on public input. And I think your comment is relevant not just today, but for folks that want to be thinking about design and planning processes going forward in any community, in any city in the country, in any place in the world. So I appreciate it. There's always work to be done. There's always improvement, and being sensitive and thoughtful to that issue of traumatization, re-traumatization is significant. So thank you for bringing it up. I wanna make sure if there are others that have comments and others that have thoughts, that we create space for them. If there's anything that we want to hear directly related to these thoughts or these ideas or observations that were brought forth around MLK corridor, we'd love that. Otherwise, what I will ask is that we'll talk about sort of the next little segment. We're going to talk about some ideas related to Congress Heights Metro Station, and then we're going to open it up again for some more conversation. I'll do one last call to see if there's any more thoughts on this piece. All right, I appreciate all this feedback, all these comments. Let's pass it back to Lee and team, and let's hear about a little bit of these ideas around Congress Heights Station.
Okay, this will go back to Adam again for this.
So we looked at the existing vibrant corridor of MLK Avenue Southeast. There's an emerging, it already is a great metro station at South Congress Heights. It connects the region, but this is the other opportunity area for urban design to really have a focus. We were starting to think through what is really happening around that metro station right now. You have new housing, family-sized housing at St. Elizabeth's that's 80% affordable. You have the new townhouses that have come in or are ongoing construction right now. You have an amazing new healthcare resource through the Whitman Walker facility that's coming in. There is an evolving design around offices, mixed use at the Metro, along with I think the mayor recently announced a library being put in there. You have a new school, the bar, a pathway to college oriented school under construction. And along with that, there's new housing being put in. That's a lot. And you also have this amazing, resource. You have the one very critical food resource in the neighborhood, the giant shopping center that's existing. And we're really focused right now, as mentioned by Felicia early in the conversation, the area north at the St. Elizabeth's campus is a little bit outside of our focus of this conversation. And so we're really looking at that south metro entrance and kind of how that public space can begin to serve the community. And once again, this is a brainstorming session. You're giving us the ideas, what needs to be there and what should be in this planning process as a kind of bottom-up method. We did a little bit of research. The owner is planning on adding 100% affordable and 25,000 square feet of retail. And it's underway. It's still being worked on. And this is their rendering on the bottom left corner. This is not us, but this is the conceptual rendering that they've proposed. And we're trying to say, what could this public space be? Everyone in the community is going to be walking to this metro station. It needs to be something that serves the community. What could this this important transit resource be made into an opportunity area? We thought as designers, and once again, pulling back, some of the ingredients of great vibrant public spaces are areas for art, areas for a healthy environment with trees, with seating, with safety lighting, with art lighting, and also giving people a place together, sit and enjoy the space. And these are just a few different photos of kind of, well-designed public spaces that are about the same size, smaller scale, pocket parks and green spaces that could be activated just to kind of generate some ideas. And what we're interested in from you is, what do you want to see here? What is the critical ingredients that will make this Metro Plaza a public plaza that serves you? From an urban design perspective, having a space that is activated by retail or uses that kind of bring people to the street, where there's places to gather, places to sit, having opportunities like lighting that could both be an artistic element, but also bring a sense of safety and comfort if you're walking to the metro at night. Places like outdoor seating so that you can sit on a bench with your neighbor, have a snack, like kids can kind of hang out. These are important ingredients that start to make a vibrant public space. And right now the Congress Heights Metro Station is one of the lesser used in the system, and as these new developments happen and as people start to use them, as this new development happens, it's going to get more and more active. And so making it more and more active in a way that serves the community is really what we're looking for. So, we're kind of opening up the discussion. What kind of open space and street elements do you envision? What are some, we're the city, we don't own this building necessarily, but we can signal to the ownership, like, these are the uses that would best serve the community at this location. This is, do we want outdoor seating? Do we want outdoor retail? What would fit here? And, a great opportunity about this space too, as it is, the opportunity with newer buildings is you have better access for maybe some of those larger format uses that don't really fit in well in smaller, older buildings. So what sort of uses would help us here? So I'm going to pass it off to Josh to kind of guide the discussion.
So, Mr. Mustafa, I saw you just put some thoughts into the chat, but you got your hand raised. But yeah, feel free to echo what you wrote down.
I think there's a tremendous opportunities around these metro stops, both Congress Heights and Acosta. Historically, we see another positive district. Metro sites can generate a lot of economic opportunities, and we want to make sure in Ward 8 that those opportunities benefit the residents, because it's not only the design, it's who owns the activity around the metro lot. I mean, we could have an excellent design, but if none of the community own anything and can generate any economics out of it, it's still a tremendous missed opportunity. We could actually build wealth from the metros if we develop it in a way that ensures that the community is going to benefit. So I would encourage, as you look at the design, that as much as possible, we begin to incorporate that, a strategy where the community very early in the development of the metros can have some ownership of it. And that's my point.
It's a great thought, making sure that whatever we put in place, has embedded in it some kind of ownership model that allows, folks in the community to benefit directly from that sort of equity stake, what's going on. I really like that idea. I saw some comments, Dr. Adams, you talked about food shops, make it convenient for commuters. I think the question I would use to build on that comment is, when you are coming and going from the metro, what kind of experience would you like to have? Is it being able to pop into a store to pick up a snack or get lunch that you'll eat later on in the day, heading to work or whatnot? Is it being able to sit and reflect? Is it being able to sort of get closer to nature or green space? That kind of thing. Would love more thoughts. I saw Anna, you had a thought about, making that metro space more vibrant. How can we activate it with small events? Things like music or outdoor activities, kind of pop-ups, they call them, right? So I think these are great ideas. How do we create a space that can then later be programmed in the right way and be kind of a community serving type of space? If you build a Wawa there, Darryl Ross says, yeah, and then employ people from the community and have owners or managers who are in the community. Again, really, really important. A bike rental space. So I'm not sure if you mean like Capital Bike Share or something like more of like a rent a bike, like bike and roll for the whole day, that kind of thing. But yeah, I agree. Having more options and sort of connecting different transit modes is usually a really cool opportunity that we've seen work well in other parts of the district. So what else? Anything else we're missing? Any other sort of ideas or images or drawings that you just saw around the station that you wanted to react to?
I had a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
How do you, if you create a space like a park, how do you keep it from being or looking like the park that's on the corner of MLK and Malcolm X?
That's a great question. I might defer to either CQA or the folks at OP to talk about what, maintaining that space and activating it could look like.
Could you explain the question just a little bit more? You say keeping it from looking like the Shepherd Park at the interface with Martin Luther King. Is it because that it's kind of run down? The grass, the public's kind of plaza area is very small at the corner, and then there's a lot of area where the maintenance has not been kept up on the park. I mean, there is a nice playground for the kids, but it's further back. Could you just explain that a little bit more? And I think we could definitely answer that with some thoughts.
I don't know if you can answer that, because if the mayor hasn't been able to figure it out and the community hasn't been able to figure it out, I'm not sure you can answer the question. I think it's, we're addressing the elephant in the room. We're talking about doing all these great things, and I'm not by any means speaking for the entire Ward 8. I am a resident. I'm speaking for myself, and these are the questions that I'm asking. And when I engage with the community, I'm speaking from what I hear. So we have this major issue, and nobody seems to be addressing that.
So, Dr. Adams, one thing I know there's been some conversation around is the ownership of that particular parcel. Felicia, I don't know if it makes sense to talk about, or if you're able to talk about kind of the status of the ownership of that parcel, and maybe what the changes could look like and could allow, different opportunities could be allowed for if ownership changes.
Really quickly, I will make sure that we're not getting ahead. Or do we have any other comments about the metro area before we get into Shepherd Parkway?
I do. I have a comment. This is Cherie Pendleton, but I'll speak after you guys answer the other question.
So regarding Shepherd Parkway, it is owned by the National Park Service. They recently developed a redesign strategy for the full parkway, but also a specific redesign for the leg at Malcolm X and MLK. And we have been working with National Park Service to figure out what the timeline is, and we haven't heard anything. So in the meantime, one of our recommendations and what we're already working on with the Department of Parks and Rec is to just gain more control over the space. So that could look like a transfer, an actual land transfer. It's happened, there's precedent for this. There are some other parks that communities are interested in getting into the district inventory. It could look like a memorandum of understanding with National Park Service, where it's still owned by National Park Service, but it's formally managed by DPR. DPR is very interested in that. So those are our strategies moving forward in terms of taking control over the space. But that is the latest that we've heard from the National Park Service is the redesign that they've developed, but we haven't gotten an implementation timeline. But our hope really with this plan is to advocate for district control of the site.
And that was my question, because when control is really the operative word. How do you control all of the things that are going on there in terms of just the activity, the debris, that whole area? I mean, if you can do it, why hasn't it been done?
So some of the one of the things that I think I want to highlight, thinking about public space and thinking about kind of public realm challenges, is there are two things, right? So we understand that the kind of underlying issues for some of the unsafe behaviors that happen at the park. They're overall, people are disenfranchised, they don't have economic access, there are housing challenges, education challenges, a whole gamut of things. While we are a land use planning agency, one way that we can get at that is by planning for more opportunities for that. So in our recommendations, you'll find that we're advocating for things like training. There's a giant new medical hospital coming and lots of opportunity for jobs. And a lot of our residents, Congress sites are not prepared for that just yet. So we're advocating for programming and opportunities that take advantage of the new development, for current residents to take advantage of the new development and new opportunities that are coming. So that's one of the ways that we get at the public safety piece. The other piece of it is there's designing the site itself, and designing and thinking about what activities are happening around the park, right? So the Malcolm X Park, the leg of the park at Malcolm X MLK is surrounded. There's a gas station on one side and a couple liquor stores on another. And we know that land uses determine what happens in public space outside of those uses, outside of the walls of those buildings. So the other opportunity that we're looking at is, what other uses can we encourage? Now, as was already mentioned, we don't have if there's a landowner, we can't force them to make it something else, no more than we can show up to your house and force you to move out and have someone else move in. But it's important for us to create the framework, right? If there's a certain level of change that someone wants to make to a site, that might trigger, okay, you want to make change to more than half the site, guess what? You have to follow these whatever design guidelines, new rules, what have you. And so that's how we're thinking about that space in terms of change. And the truth of the matter is that the environment around the park hasn't changed very much. And so the activities at the park, the state of the park can't really change until the activities around the park are changing. Until we're really getting people connected to more opportunities, and ultimately, and we have control over the park itself, so that we can be more active in the actual programming, management, cleanup, et cetera, of the park.
So Felicia,
Thank you, Felicia.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to make sure we have a little space for Cherie to share. You had a comment about the metro station ideas.
Yes, it probably has already been said before. I think there are very good incorporations of community at other metro stations. Ooh, I'm sorry, I just came up the steps. Like Federal Triangle. They had a nice commuting group of people. They had CVS nearby, businesses nearby. So I think there could be an opportunity, but just to echo what everybody else has been saying, I think there's an issue with quality. We can have all of this stuff and wish for the best and have the best intentions, but if it's not a quality convenience store, it will be the typical corner store, the typical takeout place that would come to the metro station that literally, as a resident, I'm sick of the quality that I get from those types of establishments. So I don't know how policies could improve quality, but I think that's pretty much what we need to focus on.
Thank you, Cherie. Appreciate it. And I see some folks are really echoing your comments here in the chat. Thank you. I'm looking at the clock. I want to make sure we have time for the next two sections that we're going to present. So I might pass it back to Adam to bring us to the conversation on housing opportunity sites, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'll be me, actually.
Okay,
But
sorry, Lee, it's all you.
But if you have any questions that you don't want to forget, please drop them in the chat. I'm answering them. The chat is very active, and I'm answering them as quickly as I can see things. And also happy to stay on later after the program ends to continue to answer any questions as long as you need me.
The next topic that we wanted to talk about and brainstorm on with you was the housing opportunity sites and about housing opportunities. Next slide. A lot of discussion was focused, and we listened from our tour. We've been talking with residents. We've been talking with OP and really looking at the visioning statements that have come from the community to kind of formulate the discussion points here to get your input on this today. But from what we understand and what we've been able to see in the community vision statements is that there's a tremendous need for housing that will accommodate families. How do we get more housing? It's not just the small units. There is a need for smaller units that might be more applicable near metro, but there's also a need for affordable housing that would accommodate families, and where you're not cramming, in a 2-bedroom, you've got a large family or 1-bedroom unit. And of course, how do we deal with multi-generational and senior housing and through redevelopment? And how does this stay equitable? There are planned unit developments, the one we were just looking at the Metro that's coming in. We understand that that has been worked out with the previous residents on the site and that it's going to be 100% affordable. We don't have a lot of information on that. We wanted to share what we knew as with the new owners that are coming in, the new developers, but that sounds like it could be promising with 100% affordable and bringing in about 20 to 25,000 retail. But again, as Ms. Cherie just said, you know, the quality of what comes in is critically important. There are a number of underutilized or vacant or other sites in the area that we were going to talk about in a minute about affordable housing and how that affordable housing, whether it be rental or home ownership, might come about and what some opportunities might be there. We want to get your feedback on that. And then there's a discussion about the residential zoning and how that might be upzoned slightly to allow for variations of housing structures and ways to modify and adapt existing as well as new infill for affordable and equitable housing. Next. Again, preserving the existing dedicated affordable housing is critical, but we have to look at also how housing can be renovated, how it can be upgraded. So we need to talk about that. The older housing stock, there are a lot of apartments in an area just south of Alabama that are potential candidates for upgrades or rehabilitation. Some are fine, others could use some help. And this also deals with single family owners and what are some of the best mechanisms to help single family owners rehabilitate or improve their houses. And there are a number of programs next, if you go to the district, that we're not going to get into all of this because this is the policies and accessibility issues. The district has a lot on the books that are available, and that could be a completely separate education on that and discussion. But getting this information out to residents so they know what's available, what's coming from the district, and what is available as residents is something that should be, obviously noted. Next. So as we look at the area, it's a tremendous neighborhood of single family and attached townhouses and detached units. But the question is, again, how can we get to opportunities for new infill that can help with the affordability gap? Metro is one thing where people can come in, but a lot of the affordability needs to be looked at in the residential neighborhoods and in the multifamily areas, but particularly the single family. There can be some really opportunities if with the slight upzoning in these areas to do additions to houses, to vacant sites that we'll see here that could allow for new infill housing, or even taking some housing and subdividing the floors up into a single family into multiple units. We see this in other cities, especially in the Northeast. You'll find in a lot of the cities, places that have houses that have actually been, divided up into flats or apartments per floor. Next. So one thing that a lot of you have probably heard about is this housing typology called the missing middle. And that is a problem throughout the country of the smaller scale units that come into that are more compatible with single family neighborhoods or townhouse or row house neighborhoods. But also they can be small apartment buildings or condominium buildings, but they fit where they're not towering over the adjacent residents. So this is an issue that cities are grappling with throughout the country. These are just some examples of how we might start to look in Congress Heights and other parts of the city of how this scale of housing that can provide multiple units in smaller dwellings. In other words, the packages, smaller being, 3 and 4 and 2-story houses or townhouses or single family houses can come in. But one of them in the lower right-hand corner is actually a project in Northwest, just next to North Capitol, which is the internal block of a townhouse block just north of New York Avenue. The internal area of the block was converted into alley housing. There's another opportunity for basically turning this into a series of row houses that could be flats or individual row houses. Taking townhouses and again dividing them up into flats, or taking houses and dividing them up into flats, or small scale buildings that might start to infill in this area. As a couple property owners wanted to, if their property was upzoned slightly, and then they came together and wanted to kind of take advantage of opportunity for wealth creation on their property, the property they own. And they gathered with some neighbors to come in with and say at some point, well, we'd like to consolidate our lots to come together to put in a smaller building that could serve more people with affordable housing in a small building. That is something that should be looked at or could be looked at next. There are a number of lots and areas throughout the area that have been discussed about potential increases in new housing. One area is this area in the south or more western edge, just south of Shepherd Park and to the west of Martin Luther King, where there's actually an area that was discussed about putting in potential new housing of the scale we were just talking about, either small multi-unit buildings or a couple, maybe 2 to 3 floors that could be divided up into individual flats that would fit with the single family and the row house nature of the adjacent residences. Next. We talked about the PUDs that are coming in. This is a very different type of housing. Again, this is not necessarily appropriate to come down right in the middle of a single family neighborhood. But the areas that we were talking about and that residents and businesses have talked to us about on the Martin Luther King corridor of coming in, and where there are vacant sites where one could come in and build up to the street or build behind some of the existing retail, the larger buildings along the Martin Luther King corridor or the Alabama Avenue corridor around Metro and going to the east a little bit over toward Giant, past the school, etc. There are some areas in there that higher intensity housing, such as this redevelopment, could happen. And then, of course, when we were out there, and you all know the neighborhood, there are a number of areas where there are larger single family homes. And in many areas of the country, these larger homes could be subdivided up into a flat on one floor, the upper level being another apartment or a flat or a condo in home ownership or a co-op. There are different ways to approach this, but this should be looked at also in order to keep the fabric of the neighborhood. The neighborhoods in this particular small area plan and in Ward 8, there are a lot of housing stock that's absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, and it has been increasing in property value and in cost, which has been a negative. So the idea, well, it's a positive and a negative. It's negative for accessibility. It's positive for recognition of the significance of the place. But the way to approach this may be, we want to get your feedback on, or taking some of the homes and providing multiple units within a home so that the fabric of the neighborhood and the street can be there. And of course, then access to loans and opportunities for financing for residents to be able to make improvements to their homes for maintenance and keep up. So these are some of the things, preserving the affordability that we, as well as the others that we'd like to place out there. This is an extremely important aspect of the existing neighborhood and how redevelopment, and from an urban design perspective, what is the character of these different neighborhoods and areas within the small area plan might move forward. And we'd like to get your feedback on this to help inform the next steps. So, Josh, we'll turn it over to you.
Lee, appreciated. Again, a lot to digest and to process and think about. I know that there were a bunch of comments coming in through the chat. One that stood out to me early on in the presentation, Dr. Adams wrote about sort of tall buildings towering over, would be overwhelming. And so really prioritizing and thinking about sort of human scale design, or maybe not as much height when we're thinking about adding new housing. Thank you for that. There was a question about eminent domain. I know this has come up during some of the other small area planning processes. So at some point, Felicia, I may ask you to sort of comment on eminent domain as a tactic or a strategy. And then, I see this comment by Brahman about sort of, how do we incentivize people or provide them resources to kind of celebrate existing facades and lifting up the existing sort of texture of the structures that we have, in Congress Heights, keeping communities and homeowners strong. Great point. Anyone else want to offer thoughts? Additional locations where you might want to see additional housing, thinking about the types of housing you would want to see, anything else that Lee just covered? I see a couple other comments coming in through the chat, which is always a great option to contribute. So thank you for doing that. So thinking about sort of, mixed use types of development where it's a quality retailer at the bottom, and then, indoor parking and, maybe a couple of floors of housing units above, those types of models. I think those kinds of examples are great to hear, and we'd love to sort of continue to get feedback on, what your preferences are for what you'd like to see. Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is there one particular, or going back, Adam, if you could go back to the missing middle, was there one particular aspect of the housing typologies or a couple that resonates as particularly potentially, or a couple of them, applicable for this community, the new infill?
Hello, I just had a comment or more of a question, but I'm not sure if you'll be able to address it or not. But is there any way for the existing public housing along Wheeler Road to be raised and replaced? Because I think that would be an ideal site for some affordable housing. But I'm not sure if this is the correct form or not. But I'm just saying, just gut all of that out and modernize it, and then add the affordable housing aspect of it.
It's a great question. Lee or Felicia, do you want to talk about sort of the limitations of, with SAP and what, what the possibilities are? Yeah.
So that's a really good question. We, as part of the plan recommendations that we have so far, we are recommending one-to-one replacement of all affordable housing. We, as far as we know now, we haven't heard from our agency partners that they're intending to raise it. We are going through district-wide a transformation of our public housing and a public housing approach. So it's definitely not outside the realm of possibilities farther in the future. But if and when that does happen, it will be under the umbrella of this plan recommendation, which is to replace, so we don't lose any affordable housing that we have, and to replace it one-to-one for projects like that.
The only thing that I would add is that, to build on what Felicia has just said, many housing authorities are looking at this, as she has mentioned. And in some of the areas, there are opportunities for not only doing one-for-one, but also increasing the opportunities for more affordable housing, where it becomes a mixed income community, where there's a bit of affordable and there's a bit of market rate to help with the financing. So there are a lot of mechanisms that the housing authorities are looking at to move forward, and that's just something that is in the works right now in many cities.
I did see a question about building one level homes. Mr. Ross, do you mean one level like single family homes, or are you talking about like condo flats? And if you like, you can answer that in the chat. But I will say that given that the existing character for this community is denser, we haven't been thinking of like ranch style homes as being a new housing type that would be implemented here. But we have been discussed. Actually, this part of this conversation is to see how you all feel about flats. So like condos that are one story. We want to respond to the fact that we have a lot of seniors that are needing to age in place. You have people that don't want to need the stairs for whatever reason. And so we want to make sure that there's enough housing variety for those larger family style homes that don't require the use of stairs. So that is something that we are discussing and have made recommendations for.
Yeah, I would say that the inclusion of outdoor space, which was mentioned here in the chat, is something that's very important to try to incorporate in, whether it's a small unit or a small building or single family home. The idea of having some personal outdoor space is something that is part of, as an urban design strategy, something that's normally tried to be incorporated when possible.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Felicia about opportunities for senior housing. We live in an awesome historic city, so those buildings often were built with stairs, not thinking about people of varying ages or abilities. And one of the opportunities for changing the zoning in this area is you might get the opportunity for these smaller apartment buildings, but the plus side, they are bigger sometimes, but the plus side is they often have elevators and they often have ways to kind of bring access. And being a community where most of the buildings were built a very long time ago, that they weren't designed for that population in mind. So this is a great opportunity for equity as well.
Well, one other thing, just a little add, a lot of the images you see right here will show a couple stairs or steps, but what happens is on the side of this, there will be a ramp that's incorporated, like in the apartment building in the lower left side. There's actually a ramp component just to the left of that entry area. It's a stair and a ramp configuration, and then there's also an accessible ramp coming in from the left. And most of these have an area where you can come in from an accessible component in the newer buildings. The older buildings that would be subdivided, a little bit like what Felicia and Adam were talking about. But thanks for all the comments that are coming in on the chat also. So appreciate it.
Lee, thank you. And keep those chat comments coming. One thing I want to note, we are getting very close to 1 p.m., but I agree with Felicia. I am happy to stick around. I think our team is happy to stick around a little bit past 1 so we can get through this last section that we want to talk about, which is on connectivity, which is sort of an overarching theme. But we, for folks that have to go at 1 because of time limitations, please drop comments into the chat. Please pick up the contact info from public input or from the chat. Email Felicia. Keep the conversation going. But if you can stay, please do. And we're going to get back into a discussion right after a few more slides on connectivity. So Lee, why don't we head into these?
This one we will turn over to Nandor to talk about walkability and connectivity.
Thank you, Lee. We'll keep this quick for everyone. Our last brainstorming idea today is fostering better neighborhood connectivity. Next slide. We've heard from the community about, increasing the quality and the safety of public spaces, potentially outlining investment in improved pedestrian comfort, things like lighting, better streetscape and vegetation, maybe some shelters and furniture repairs. We've heard a lot about trash collection and litter prevention along MLK Avenue and maybe some other parts of the neighborhood. And then this idea of creating public art in new and improved pedestrian facilities. So, maybe there are moments of art where community art can kind of highlight a particular intersection or somewhere unexpected, and it really brings maybe a moment of joy in someone's commute or something like that. And then we've heard about unauthorized car access down Oxen Run Park. So we're keeping all these comments in mind, what the community has said so far. And again, today is a brainstorming session. We want to hear from you all on this. Next slide. There are moments in the community where we believe we could foster a little bit better connectivity. Maybe there's topographic changes. You can see in this bottom slide, the road abruptly ends and there's kind of like this inelegant staircase up to another property. And maybe we could look at moments like this where if I'm a community member and I need to get to the next parcel over, maybe there's a more artful or a well-lit and kind of more beautiful pathway that can traverse some of these topographical challenges. Next slide. This is an example on Trenton Street that we found where there's a disconnect in the street grid, and this is an area near high schools and elementary schools, and I would imagine and we were out there in the afternoon where a lot of the children were biking home. A lot of teenagers were trying to get around the neighborhood, and moments like this, over time, it doesn't have to happen immediately, but as the community evolves over time, we'd like to kind of see kind of knitting together these connections and going from A to B a little bit more, graceful and elegant. Next slide. Another moment that we thought could use better connectivity is the Congress Heights Recreation Center. It's, we spent some time walking around the recreation center, and it is quite difficult. It's not very visible from the major roads, and it is quite difficult to get to. And with some small improvements, maybe there's better lighting and kind of a street connection or a sidewalk connection. And I know there's some topography in the area. Maybe there's a way to kind of design in a way to highlight the recreation center, how great of a resource it is within the community, and may help it better serve the community. This is a diagram where maybe some other potential connections could be made neighborhood-wide as the city, as property by property, these grids and networks evolve over time. Next slide. And we just wanted to show you all some images of how examples from around the country where you're dealing with topographic change. We're sensitive to bike and wheelchair access over topographic change. So here are some examples of how some of these connections may be, and incorporating. We really took to heart the comment about public art. Can we show some creativity and broadcast what this great community is all about in some of these moments? So these are just some visuals for you all to think about and for us to get feedback on. Next slide. And then, in some areas of the neighborhood, there are a lot of fences, and I think these are particularly related to some of the condos and multifamily buildings, and we saw some examples of kind of landscape buffers and kind of, we'll say, retaining walls. And then you have moments like this in the upper left-hand corner where you have fences. And we wanted to kind of get some feedback on the community on streetscape and access and security and balancing security with connectivity and what you all are seeing on the ground. Next slide. And one overall idea we're looking at is improved lighting, especially in high traffic areas near public parks. We heard a lot of concerns about safety and that, and we like to, again, taking public art as an idea, maybe we can integrate improved lighting with public art and have these moments of creativity within the neighborhood. Next slide. And as as these important neighborhoods within the community evolve and become more and more important, we want to make sure the links between the three, and we're highlighting right here in this diagram, the metro station, MLK Plaza, and then kind of north on MLK Jr., kind of a lot of the activity on Chaney's and those elementary schools, and kind of the north edge of the neighborhood. You know, as these places evolve, we really want to make sure that they're well linked, they're well connected. Community members could kind of traverse easily, you know, not only walking and driving, but also biking and other multimodal modes. Next. So we'll leave this diagram as the last diagram, just kind of going back to the framework. You know, we're thinking about how this area is evolving over time, how it's going to continue to evolve. We have these focus areas, but we've talked about a lot of, you know, different nodes and different areas, but we'll leave this image up on the screen as we open up for comments. Josh, I think this is our last slide.
Perfect, and thanks for leaving this one up, Nandor. Again, a lot to think about here. A lot of ground covered, sort of literally and figuratively, in these slides. But we've seen a lot of comments and thoughts come in through the chat. You know, obviously, I want to remind folks, you know, if you want to come off mute and offer feedback, you know, vocally, please just use the raise hand function, or cut my rambling off and let me know you want to chime in. But I'm kind of scrolling back up in the chat to see some things. You know, I did see a lot of comments around bus lines and bus service. You know, right now, the need to transfer to get to and from areas within the study area is difficult, and then also transferring to reach other neighborhoods adjacent to Congress Heights and further afield is also difficult. It just adds time and frustration. So how do we think about you know, either rethinking some bus routes or bus service, and maybe even complementing with other modes where we can. I don't know if folks on the screen have been experimenting with scooters or, you know, shared bikes or other solutions like that, but I'd love to hear comments to that effect. Let's see. There's a comment from Bronwyn about, you know, how some of these improvements are going to require, you know, substantial you know, policy change, whether incentivizing things or, you know, investment, which is absolutely true. And is there a plan about how we attract those resources, and how do we modify policy to incentivize? Great questions, and I'm not sure that the answers have been found just yet, but it's very good that you're raising that. Grayson, to your point, we're going to do a couple of slides on what's next, so we'll talk about the timeline from here. But thank you for raising that. What else? I've been having sort of a side conversation about access and accessibility with one of the members of the community who's on. Thanks for that. I think that certainly it was sort of raised when we talked about housing, talking about building different housing types that have a variety of you know, that accommodate a variety of accessibility needs. I think that probably applies just as much to connectivity and getting around Congress Heights for sure. Thinking about things like ramps and curb cuts within public spaces, for example, and that's just sort of a very small piece of accessibility. Yes, you know, how do we make sure that people can get around the neighborhood to access fresh, healthy, nutritious food options, right? So I think, you know, part of it is not just making sure we have options within Congress Heights, but how easy is it for people to get to those food options and those destinations? Thanks for raising that. What else? Anything else on connectivity? Anything else that was raised in these past few slides? Linkages, you know, flow, pedestrian flow, anything?
What about the connection to Giant from the end of Savannah? Any comments on that? I mean, there's a small stair and then a long walkway. As we were thinking, there was probably more of an opportunity to open that up, more visibility, but also a nicer stair, nicer condition. Any comments on that?
And as people are thinking, you, Brenda, also saw the question about, is there a neighborhood parking transit pedestrian analysis, which includes DHS and the new hospital. Great question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm not sure if Felicia or others from OP might have an answer on that front.
Thank you. So there, with the development of the new parking, the new development on St. Elizabeth's, I know that they are looking and have to look at the parking. What we found is that we've actually lost a lot of parking along the main street, which has been a huge challenge for our businesses. And so one of the solutions that we are looking at is how to better combine parking between St. Elizabeth's and the rest of Congress Heights, and how to one, combine it physically, but also how to implement wayfinding so that wherever you park, you know that you are in the midst of destination, whether that's the MLK corridor, whether that's the Sports Entertainment Center. We definitely have found that it makes a lot of sense to combine the parking. We want to make sure people know where they are and know that they are not, if they're parking in St. Elizabeth, they're not at this new shiny place, but they're also within walking distance of a very critical community commercial center as well. So we are thinking about that, yes. And then also I do want to add that in addition to the traffic analysis, that's DDOT's and I'll let Gabe jump on, but DDOT has been looking at a new bus approach, rapid bus along MLK. So there's the parking piece, but then also how to get people out of cars if they don't need to be in their cars. And finally, we did receive a grant from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments to do a pedestrian study, and that has just kicked off. Many of you may have seen tents and things outside with our consultants surveying, but that's kind of ongoing and will support some of the transportation analysis that we've already done.
Thanks, Felicia. Adam, I saw you coming off mute.
Yeah, I just had a quick kind of overarching way of framing this that I think is really helpful for us as a designers. Is we talked about MLK as this great existing main street that can be improved, and we talked about all this new development happening at the metro, and we just felt like these links, the really critical part of this transportation link from a retail perspective and from a community building perspective, is making those walks along Alabama Avenue particularly, but then also through St. E's clear with wayfinding, lighting, so that those businesses along MLK really benefit from all this development. And those businesses along MLK, kind of people like Felicia was saying, they can park and go to the entertainment facilities and then walk and grab a sandwich on MLK, or go to the great pizza place, or go really see and be a part of the community. And so that's what this neighborhood connectivity is about. And that's kind of the framework in which we're approaching it.
And I also want to, I see that Gabe is ready to speak now. So let's go ahead and let him share some more information. And again, Gabe's representing the Department of Transportation in this conversation.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, recognizing the importance of these important nodes like MLK, Alabama Avenue, and the St. Elizabeth, DDOT is in the process of looking at safety connectivity issues along the corridors. We just kicked off the MLK Good Hope Road intersection safety and connectivity study. We're trying to find a way to improve the operations, traffic operation in that road. So we're looking at a way to reconnect 13th Street to 8th Street, so that it provides another option. So instead of coming to that MLK Good Hope Road intersection, you can go down 13th Street, 8th Street to 11th Street Bridge. So that is underway. We just started that last month. Then the bus priority corridor, they're looking at expanding it. Right now it ends at W Street from the intersection. Then we also have a project coming up on Alabama Avenue, safety and connectivity improvements. That is yet to begin, but it's going to be beginning, probably early part of next year. So these are all, improvements that DDOT is making given the activities happening at St. Elizabeth and then the three nodes you all mentioned about. So I just wanted to let you guys know about this. Thank you.
Thank you for the update, and thank you as well for the continued engagement and coordination with DDOT, who is an important partner on the SAP process. I see more comments coming into the chat. Darryl Ross, thanks for talking about the opportunity to engage Events DC to talk about ESA, and the model they've could potentially use to incorporate some other uses similar to what's been done with Capital One Arena. I think these are the kinds of ideas that are really helpful. So keep them coming. Anything else related to connectivity that we want to put out into the space? I'm also scrolling back up into the chat to see if there's anything that that we need. Youth engagement. Ms. Alexander, absolutely. I think, it's actually good to come back to that. I would argue youth engagement, yes. I also would love to hear more ideas for other groups, other partners we can bring into the conversation. Again, to sort of echo what I said before, OP and the current existing sort of set of partners, I think have done a good job. They've got a great community advisory council, but more voices involved in this process is always going to lead to a better outcome. So thank you for making those connections, and thank you for bringing them in so that we can identify what those needs are that exist out in the community, how to sort of think about design that'll serve as many people as possible. It's a great question. I also want to.
I did want to actually provide some more information. I think that we can't stress enough how critical youth engagement is, and I will say that in addition to speaking with youth ourselves, we have a partner at Blue High School on our interagency working group that we've been engaging with. So some of the recommendations that have come out of this, what we find is that a lot of different demographics need the same kinds of things out of our public spaces. So when we get engaged our youth, and we actually have some really great photos online if you want to take a look, but they were really concerned about the cleanliness or the lack of cleanliness of public spaces. We heard that from our youth that they really wanted to see safer housing. And so better quality, housing, which is something that we address in our recommendations. But as far as public space, youth were looking for places to where they could, grab a snack or, grab a soda or what have you, and just exist without being harassed, and exist in places that are clean. So we heard that a lot. We've heard from parents that there is a need for more play spaces. And so when we talk about playable art, we talk about revamping some of these public spaces, even the new community center, that's all really a center for what the youth need. Finally, we have been working with our facilities partners, so that's Parks and Recreation, that's public libraries, to talk about how, as they redevelop their public spaces, how they can ensure that there is a youth space and youth programming to build on some of the educational needs, some of the extracurricular needs and desires that youth have, as well as access to information that can help them jumpstart their careers.
Thank you, Felicia, for offering a little bit more context there. I appreciate it. Keep the comments in the chat coming. I do want to sort of help us maybe begin to close things out. People have been incredibly generous with their time today. You've been with us for over 2 hours, and I get the sense that we've only begun a much greater conversation. That's the challenge with doing any of these events with like the few hours we usually have to do them in. I do want to say one thing, which is that the ideas, the observations, the recommendations, the potential futures and concepts you've seen here are all very much rough draft. And thank you for allowing me as a facilitator to speak in rough draft. Thank you for allowing the OP and the Cunningham Quill team to speak in rough draft in a way that opens up a space to get all of your feedback. I think that has been the spirit and the intent of the entire small area plan approach and process, is put an idea out there. It may not be perfect, it may not be right, but then create a space for the community who knows these areas best and know them well to come back and say, no, that's not right, or yes, you're getting close, but we're continuing to sort of refine where we want to go with the SAP, and we're still very much a work in progress. So thanks for giving us that space and that grace to work this process and showing up with the authentic selves that you've brought today. I really appreciate it, and the candidness and the honesty and the directness. Thank you. Rather than go through a long summary of everything we've heard, I think in the spirit of just getting things closed out, I do want to pass things over to OP, Felicia, Melissa, others to talk about sort of where we're headed and what next steps look like at this time.
Thank you, Josh. It may be a little dark. I'm in the office, and I think I don't know how to trigger the lights, but I am here, and I'll walk us toward the end of the presentation. As Josh said, and I want to reiterate, this workshop is really just another stepping stone to getting all of our recommendations in order. And so this really has been a really good opportunity to hear all of your thoughts about design. This is just part one of this design conversation, and we'll have an opportunity to circle back with ideas now that we've heard all of your thoughts. And we'll continue to hear your thoughts. So online, there are a number of opportunities to continue to engage. Our draft recommendations that we have so far that we've developed over the past year, I think we've had about 30 engagements online, in person. We've been canvassing, we've had workshops, we've done focus groups with youth and with seniors, and popped in on civic association meetings and so on. And so that's ongoing. If you would like us to come speak, we want to. So the answer is yes already, to come speak if there's a specific issue that you or your organization or your constituents or what have you want to discuss, please get us on your get on our calendars, get us on your calendar and email us. I'll share the information in just a moment. Also online, we have all of our recommendations, and it's at publicinfo.com, Congress Heights Plan. So it's the same website where you were doing the public space survey. But there is a tab called draft recommendations, and they're broken down by focus area. So there's a economic development piece, and in housing and public space and all of that. And so you can see where we are with the recommendations now, and add comments. And if it responds to what your needs are, great. If not, we want to hear that. And so please just take a look at that at your leisure. And you'll find that some of the visual aspects we've been discussing today really reflect the recommendations that we've already been working on with you all and your neighbors and service providers. So the next step after the plan, we're going to work through these recommendations. We'll get draft recommendations. They're going to be updated online. So what you see on the recommendation page is not frozen. It's always being updated when we have meetings. So there will be a lot of new information soon, just based off of what we're hearing here. And so just keep an eye on that. We'll send out to our mailing list. If you're not on our mailing list, please get on that on the project webpage. We'll be sending out reminders to just take a look at the recommendations, because ultimately all of this information, including the final design drawings and recommendations based off of your feedback, it'll go into a plan document. And then that'll be the final draft plan, and then we'll kick off the legislative process. So that's where we share the draft plan with all of you, with your ANCs, with the council. There will be a public comment period for more comment. There'll be a mayoral hearing, and then ultimately the plan will go to council for approval.
I do want to add, once it goes to council, there is another public hearing. So you will have another opportunity to weigh in and express your thoughts on the plan at the council.
Thanks, Melissa. And I do want to iterate the importance of it going to council. There was a question about the implementation of this plan. And I want to really stress that implementation of this plan, really, it's an all hands on deck process. So part of that process is the approval, of course, by council, but the council also develops our budget. or helps approve our budgets for all the various agencies. And so once we have something that council has already approved that maybe identify programs or identify certain investments that are needed, that then gives the council the opportunity to then put those things into our budgets. And so that's one part of the implementation. Speaking specifically about design, when we have our design recommendations formalized and approved, that means that anytime someone wants to come into the community and build something or redevelop something, then whatever they do is then framed and informed by the policies that we've created together. And so there's that piece of it. The other big piece really is you all and our service providers. So we have a lot of folks online that are part of non-government organizations that already are doing a lot of work around things like economic development, that are doing work around job training, and already have a mission to do that. How this plan supports it is it one formalizes it in a record that is approved by council. And then when money comes around and when there are opportunities for grants or that kind of thing, we can point to a recommendation and say, oh, you know what, we had this grant for incubation, a study for determining a community incubation space. Well, we want a community incubation space. The community has asked for that. Let's apply for this to happen here in Congress Heights. And so that's kind of how the plan orders our steps moving forward. And we can take advantage of that opportunity, but so can the various nonprofits that are on the ground. So that's your Ward 8 Community Economic Development Partnership is working on the larger Ward 8 planning effort. That's the Congress Heights Community Training Development Corporation. It's all of the food service organizations can use the plan as a resource to leverage some of the knowledge you already have and some of the expertise and their mission really to get more resources for themselves and for the community. So again, I want to invite you all to stay involved. And this is just one of the ways to stay involved. You can register on the project website to get emails from us. If you heard about this through, say, Nextdoor or through an email from a neighbor, if you want to get direct emails from us, then you can register on the project website. It's on the homepage. You have to scroll down a little bit. The project email is congressheightsplan@dc.gov. I get every email that comes to Congress Heights Plan at dc.gov. If you're maybe emailing something that's like Congress Heights Plan at publicinput.com or anything like that, then I may not see it. Please, if you want to email me, Congress Heights Plan dc.gov is the best email, or my direct email at Felicia Wilson. That's VALECIA.Wilson. There's no N. Sometimes things get lost there, but Felicia Wilson at dc.gov. And you can also give us a call and leave us a voicemail on our project line. So these are the best ways to stay involved. And again, I want to thank all of you for your input. And I want to thank so many of you for your ongoing engagement in this process. It's been very long. It's been extended in many ways because of the pandemic. We are doing our best to reach everyone that we can. And so thank you to all of you who have volunteered to make that even easier and make that effort successful. And I thank you for your continued engagement and for your ideas. This is a plan that we're developing together. It's as you look through our recommendations and as you see the recommendations that come out of this conversation, you won't find anything that hasn't been sourced from a community mind. We as the Office of Planning in this space are a tool for you all to solidify your community vision and formalize it through council approval. And that is my only job. And so if you have any questions at all, please reach out to me. And I want to give you your afternoons back. We're well over time. So thank you so much for staying online. And I'll stay on for a few minutes if anyone has any other questions they want to ask.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thanks all.
I can stay on for a few more minutes too.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Felicia, and for anyone else who's on, I've unfortunately got to take my dog to the vet. So I made you host, Felicia.
Okay.
So
Good
you
luck
have
with
total
that.
control. But I'm going to stop the live stream now.
Okay.
And then I am going to end the recording.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, I'm not seeing any raised hands or questions. So with that, I think we'll close it out. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the project team for making this event happen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful session. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.